And welcome to this live question and answer session on Midland City Modern, the city's master planning process, which has just resulted in a new draft master plan for the city of Midland, which was released in September. We're now in the home stretch of giving final review and taking final community input on this draft master plan. And we would be happy to take your questions and comments on the draft master plan with this group that's here with us today. I'm your host, Selena Harris, and here with us to take your questions are folks from the Midland Planning Commission. We have the chairman of the Planning Commission, Andrew Kohlinger. And we have Planning Commission member Mecca Craig. And also joining us from the Planning Department is Ryan Smith and Jacob Kane. So thank you all for being here, and we hope to get some really good questions. So we're going to jump right into this, but first I'd like to remind those who are watching that Midland City Modern is a process to update the City of Midland's master plan, which will take us through the next 30 years of growth and development. We've been a long way in this process, probably about 2 years, taking community input and trying to determine what the master plan should entail. We've received lots of input from the community, and the draft plan was released for review in September and is moving toward adoption after the first of the year. So with that, let's start with Jacob and a little bit more understanding about why we have a master plan and why we do a master planning process.
Thanks, Selena, and thank you everyone who's joining us tonight on Facebook. We look forward to answering your questions. To get to your first question, Selena, why we undertake master planning primarily is twofold. One, it's an opportunity to bring the community together to identify priorities for our future and develop consensus about the direction that we're going to head together over the next several years. A master plan also enables our community to be proactive rather than reactive to issues that we need to address in the community in the future. And so those are two primary reasons why we undertake this process. Master planning is also something that's required under state of Michigan planning law. And so every community around the state typically undertakes a master plan. But I'm proud to say the city of Midland has a great history back to 1928 of undertaking master planning, and not just going through this process that we're nearing the end of, but using the plans that are adopted to move the community forward in ways that we need to move forward.
And the master plan is really a living, breathing document that is used by our planning commission. So Andrew and Mecca, this might be a question for you. How do you use the master plan when it comes to the things that you see come across the planning commission desk?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's very important to the work that we do. It's our vision from the community about what we think Midland should and will look like 30 years from now in 2050. So if you go to midlandcitymodern.com, you're going to see things like the future land use map and the future transportation map. And both of those are just couple of examples of what we use on a regular basis to help decide to guide our decision making about where things should be located and what improvements maybe we want to see to things like bike paths and intersections and things of that nature. So it's a really important document by that strength for helping guide our decision making process as we make progress towards realizing that vision for 2050.
It's important for us, as Andrew just mentioned, on the Planning Commission, but as you can imagine, the city is a complex operation, and there are a number of decision makers who are making choices that impact the services that we receive and the infrastructure that the city maintains. So it's important to have this document that represents our collective agreement of what we want to see the city to be, so that folks can reference that from their various departments, and we all are clear on what we want the goal to be.
So you do use it. You use it when things come up, when people have plans and development ideas to put into place in Midland. That's when the master plan really comes into play. Back over to the planning department. So how do we actually see the master plan get put into process? So has anything come of previous plans that we can relate to in knowing that developing a master plan really does meet the needs of our community when it comes to development?
Sure, that's a great question, Selena. So I can give you some great tangible examples of how past plans have helped to produce some tangible outcomes for the community. So our very first plan back in 1928, one of the major issues of the day was traffic in downtown Midland. Back in those days, US 10 ran right through downtown. And so there was a desire identified through that planning process of relocating US 10 out of downtown and really out to the edge of the city. That plan identifies a route that roughly runs diagonal to the north and east of what was then the Midland city limits. And that diagonal road that didn't exist then, but now exists today, is Saginaw Road. And so a really tangible, long-term, impactful project for the community with that relocation of US 10, of course, followed several years later by another relocation further to the north and east. More recently, our Task Force 2000 plan in 1980 identified a desire to create the Grand Curve Park in our Indian and Buttles system as you enter into downtown Midland from the east, really taking an emphasis on gateways that's continued to exist in our community over the long run. And then in our current master plan, there's a big focus on Center City, and that led to the creation of the Center City Authority that's doing great work, including our recent streetscape project on Saginaw Road. An emphasis on downtown, especially residential housing options, and we've seen some great momentum on that as well. And then updates to the Eastman Avenue corridor, particularly around US 10. And as we all know, there's been several efforts over the last 16 years of this planning period to address traffic concerns and safety issues in that area. Most recently this past summer with the addition of a right turn lane at Wackerly as you head north on Eastman. And so those are some real tangible outcomes that have resulted from prior planning processes.
So not just developers can glean information from the master plan, but even casual readers can get a feel for what Midland could look like in a few years, in 30 years, but what the priorities are of the community going forward. We do have our first question. I'm going to pop it up here. So kind of a current event question. Matt Thomas wants to know that with City Council's decision to keep Ashman and Rod as one way, is there still a plan in place to make those corridors more bikeable? What does the master plan have to say about bikeability in our community? And can we use this document to kind of help foreshadow what will be happening in the biking community going forward? That's open to anybody. Anybody can take that one.
Well, I can jump in specific to Ashman and Rod, and then maybe our planning commissioners will have some thoughts on bikeability in general. So the Ashman and Rod project, we do have identified on the future transportation map within the proposed plan corridor improvements along both streets. Generally speaking, from downtown Midland out to Center City, those one-way sections of the streets. And among the reasons for that is a stated community desire to see bikeability enhanced along those corridors. That is a project that's already underway through some funding that we've sought in partnership with our Midland Area Transportation Study to look at options primarily for Rod Street to improve multimodal service on that street, as well as connectivity between the riverfront and rail trail, downtown Midtown rather, and Center City. And so those efforts are already underway. And the plan, while it doesn't explicitly address either the previous conversations on one-way traffic, since those were happening concurrently with this master planning process, it does speak to a desire to continue to make enhancements to those corridors over the long term.
Planning Commission members, you have some thoughts on that one?
One of the things that I really loved about this process is that we heard from Jacob and Ryan as they compiled all the data that there were a few areas where the community spoke with a collective voice. And one of those areas was walking and biking and utilizing non-motorized transportation. So you will see in the plan as it's drafted now a commitment to looking at the quality of our infrastructure and making sure that it's appropriate, safely and well maintained for those types of transportation. Also having more amenities within walking and biking distance, and having more connections between those amenities and across the community.
Very good. We do have another question that came in from Gary, wanting to know, how does the master plan address things like the burial of all overhead utilities into the future? Is this the role of the master plan to look at these type of items, infrastructure and utilities, as well as the layout, design, development of our community?
Starting point on that conversation, the question about overhead utilities, I'd say number one, I don't recall receiving any feedback during the process to date on that issue. And so we have relied on the public's input on a variety of issues to help us understand what is a priority to Midlanders, and so that we can find those consensus items and bring them forward through this process. More generally, when it comes to electrical utilities, as well as communication utilities, those tend to be the two that would be overhead. Those typically fall under the purview of the utility companies. Utility companies are not in all cases enthusiastic about the undergrounding of utilities because it creates significant complications when it comes to maintenance of that infrastructure or responding in emergency situations. And so historically, the city of Midland's been pretty targeted when seeking the undergrounding of utilities where we can get the most aesthetic value or remove utility obstructions that might be in the way of other community priorities, but not been as forceful on the undergrounding of other existing utilities. And so I would suggest, if that's something that the commentary is passionate about, that they avail themselves of our comment portal at midlandcitymodern.com and share your feedback, anything you'd like to add specific to the reason why you're interested in that topic, or reach out to us in the planning department and we can discuss your comments now between now and our comment deadline on the 14th to determine whether or not there's something there we could take forward for potential inclusion and prepare amendments to this plan before adoption.
And if the burial of overhead utilities isn't necessarily addressed in the plan, it still doesn't preclude that from happening on various projects that would be interested in pursuing that. I know several projects downtown have undertaken the burial of utilities. I know we're looking at that as a possibility on the US or the Buttles redesign as a possibility. It's expensive. And I think, as you said, the maintenance issue is also one to be considered. We have another question. Pop that up. What are the top 3 priorities in the plan? So what are some of the things the new master plan is really prioritizing? Planning Commission members, if you have some thoughts on that, feel free to share that, or anything that hit you particularly strongly.
So I think, broadly speaking, it's less about what are the top 3 priorities. I think it's to me, it's important to understand that what I think are some of the biggest opportunities that are associated with the master plan. And in my mind, it really provides us with the opportunity to get stability, as well as predictability and consensus from the community. So as Mekhi was alluding to earlier, this is a plan that's going to potentially outlast us as planning commissioners, maybe even the current leadership of the city of Midland. There's going to be lots of changes over time, so priorities are going to fluctuate, but having a guiding document like this makes things more predictable, and it makes it more reliable as well. It allows us, as Jacob said, to be more proactive than reactive in what we prioritize on an ongoing basis, and ultimately wanted to make sure that we're doing all of that always with the consensus of the community. So this is one of the biggest opportunities for us to gather that consensus from the community. We've heard a lot over these 2 years already to date. We're hoping to hear more as we get closer to that December 14th date for the public comments. But ultimately, we want to create that predictability and stability with this guiding document, with the consensus and input from the community on an ongoing basis as well, in order to make sure we understand what the current priorities should be for today.
Also add, I think it's a fair question, Chris, to try to boil down the plan to just a few priorities. But as we were receiving feedback, and as you look at the document, there are a number of priorities that are spread across a few key areas: infrastructure, transportation, housing, and it would do a disservice almost to just narrow it down to the city's top 3 priorities, because there's different groups, different departments, different budget sets that are focused on different issues. So it was important for us in the process not to try to identify like just the 1, the 2, the 3 things, but to hear from the community generally and try our best in the document to categorize that, but to not prioritize just having 1 or 2 or 3 themes.
Great questions. We invite you to drop them into the comments, and we will take a look at those and try to address them as they come in. In the meantime, we're going to take just a quick break to get some refreshments, and we will be right back.
Did you know that babies love when you speak to them in an exaggerated, animated, and repetitive way?
Hey, look at this toy. Look at those colors.
Even if they don't have language skills yet, back and forth interaction creates new connections in their brain that help them with language learning. Talk, talk, talk. The more words your baby is exposed to, the more their vocabulary grows. When sung to, babies bond to you and your voice. Create fun songs for daily activities. Hearing familiar songs for wake up, snack time, and other activities helps your baby transition throughout their day. Babies don't care if you're a great singer. Sing with all your heart and bond with your baby.
The itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout.
Let's read together. Research shows that reading to your baby every day builds important connections in their brains to help them learn language, math, and social skills. Interact with your child as you read. Point and talk about what you see. Ask questions, make silly comments, and connect the story to your child's life. Read to your baby every day to build language and literacy skills.
Hi, welcome back. This is a live Facebook question and answer opportunity on the City of Midland Master Plan, the draft document that's been created through Midland City Modern. And we're here with representatives from the Midland Planning Commission, as well as the Community Development Department. So we've been talking a little bit about the master plan process, how the draft master plan has come to life. I'd like to ask this next question to the Planning Commission members. Talk a little bit about how you heard community input on priorities for the master planning document. What was the most valuable input that you received from the community on this process?
I think one of the things that really jumped out to me in this process is the engagement, the youth engagement that we had. It's definitely something that in my time on the Planning Commission, I haven't seen us done before. So was really impressed to see the level of engagement we got from students in particular. So we had over 133 high school students at Midland High and Dow High respond. We had middle school students, as well as even integrated the master plan into the second grade curriculum over the course of a year. So to me, that was really impressive. And I think beyond that, being able to see what that input was, and to see that it wasn't actually all that different from some of the other input that we were receiving from the broad community as well. I think that's what stood out to me, is that as we gathered a lot of input, there was actually a lot of consensus on a lot of items, regardless of age even. And so it was really cool to see even second graders telling us again, what they thought of Midland, and if they, were thinking about staying here at that point, and what they wanted their city to be in 30 years. So it's just to me a very interesting perspective and indicative of some of the varied input that we got throughout this process. But again, ultimately seeing some consensus around some key themes as well.
Really have to give credit to our planning staff on this one. They put together a robust process, both with us as a planning commission, taking us through a series of special meetings where we focused on various topics, brainstormed as a group, and then of course, importantly, connecting with community. I was really impressed to see their efforts to give everyone an opportunity to be heard. And it's difficult when you're trying to get the voice of everyone in the city, but folks should understand that you are not yet out of time. If you're listening to this and you've not yet given your comments, please take advantage of sending your feedback. To me, it wasn't one specific piece of feedback, but just understanding that this is a collective document. This is a community document, and people have had an opportunity to weigh in. That's what made it meaningful for me.
Wonderful. And along with that, getting that input is not always easy, and you have to, like Meki said, get very creative about how we get that input. Ryan, tell us a little bit about some of the methods that we use to go out and seek that input and encourage people to open up to us and give us some ideas.
Number of different kind of creative, engaging, formats for seeking public input. We've had a number of pop-up planning studios, as we call them, so more casual sort of formats where we're out in the community, different areas, kind of trying to touch each part of the city, everywhere from the Bay City Road corridor. We had a pop-up studio at the Civic Arena during the Midland and Dow hockey game. So there's lots of people there that we can engage with that might not otherwise see us at, say, an open house at the Grace A. Dow Memorial Library. So kind of with that, we had 11 pop-up planning studios, different open houses. We had 3 different open houses for the master plan, kind of bigger, more formatted sort of events. And then different things like kicking off the pop-up planning studios. We had a downtown bar crawl. So we kind of got to reach folks in downtown area. A lot of different coffee shops. We've reached out to, Northwood University. We had one there, engaging with those students. Just all sorts of different things. Pizza and planning is something that we're really proud of. It's kind of our version of the meeting in a box. So that really kind of gave us a chance to not be at those different events that people could hold themselves. So they could check out a pizza box from the library or City Hall and kind of complete this goal setting sort of exercise. And so we got a lot of good feedback from that. Lots of good public engagement throughout the entire process. So, which we are continuing to do kind of through the finish line.
Yeah, as you were going through that list, what I saw was a lot of us going to where the people are instead of making them sit through another boring municipal meeting, but finding where they are and having the conversations there where it's convenient. Do you have any idea how many touch points you had? How many avenues of input that were created as a result of this kind of 2-year process?
It was definitely, those touch points would be in the thousands.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yep.
Unmuted, but yeah. So just amongst the youth population alone in the community, we were approaching 1,000 touch points, and then through our other events throughout this 2.5-year period, we've had a chance to engage with so many people. And to Ryan's point, we've certainly seen people that we've seen before at public meetings. I would disagree with Selena. Our public meetings are really fun. But we knew from the outset that, the average Midlander is not going to necessarily be the person that comes to a public meeting on a regular basis. And we know people have a lot of competing demands on their time. And so we wanted to make it as easy as possible. And we also wanted to make it as much as we could. We wanted our events to enable two-way conversation, which is one thing that our formal meetings don't always provide as good of an opportunity for. And so we wanted the chance to be able to have deeper conversations with people, to not just find out why they came out, maybe if they have one issue they're concerned with, but to find out more about them and what their broader priorities are. so that we could really tap into what the consensus was across the community on a variety of issues. And as Andrew said earlier, one of the really obvious things through this process was there's a tremendous amount of consensus about what most Midlanders want to see in the future, what they're concerned about, what they're hopeful about. And I believe we've been able to capture that in this draft document.
Do you have an overall feel of what Midland will look like over the next 30 years?
I would say I think that it's continued progress on many of the things that have made Midland for several decades. And so one of those things that we heard a lot about from folks when it tied to walking and biking was a desire to have things close at hand. And so for folks who live, just to give an example, for folks who live close to Lalonde Market, we heard nothing but praise for how wonderful that is and how they would never live anywhere else but within walking distance to Lalonde Market. And then for many other people in Midland, we heard how much they wished they had something like Lalonde Market or a coffee shop or another walkable amenity within easy access by walking or biking from their neighborhoods. And so I think continued progress on introducing those things that make Midland a great place to live, continuing to build on our prior successes, addressing some of the major challenges that we've always faced, things like flooding, making sure that our infrastructure is sufficient to meet current and future needs and is well maintained, making sure that we continue to be a community of choice, somewhere that people are proud to live, and that pride is reflected in the quality of our infrastructure and our sense of place. I think those are all things that I would expect to see as we move over the course of this 30-year planning period.
Well, as we said when we started this program, and Mekhi alluded to it earlier, we are beginning to close down the comment period for this, but there is still time to give input and feedback. Jacob, can you close us out with just a little review of what happens between now and December 14th, what happens after December 14th, and how we put this new master plan into play?
Thank you. So we've been collecting public comments on the plan and answering questions related to the plan throughout the process, but officially on this draft plan since September. We will be wrapping that up on December the 14th. So we do ask that if folks have questions or comments on the plan, that they provide those to us by the 14th so that we can compile those, provide them to the Planning Commission, and give the Planning Commission an opportunity to consider all the public feedback and provide us as staff with final direction on amendments that we'll make to this draft plan before it's adopted. So we would anticipate that those comments will be introduced to the Planning Commission in January. We'll get final direction from them on amendments, and we'll bring a final amended plan back for consideration for adoption sometime probably later in the spring of 2024. After that, that's when the real work begins, because that's going to be a call to all Midlanders, not just those that are serving an elected or appointed office of the city or on staff, but everyone in the community to help us to make the vision that's contained within this master plan a reality.
Wonderful. Well, it's been great conversation this evening. Andrew, Mekhi, we appreciate you joining us tonight, and really appreciate the volunteerism, the work that you do on the Midland Planning Commission. And Jacob and Ryan, your work in the planning department just does fantastic things for Midland. Again, if you're watching from home, be sure to check out the draft master plan. You can view that at midlandcitymodern.com. And when you can, give us some feedback before December 14th as we begin to wind down our Midland City Modern master planning process. So on behalf of the City of Midland, thank you for joining us.
Did you know that babies love when you speak to them in an exaggerated, animated, and repetitive way?
Hey, look at this toy. Look at those colors.
Even if they don't have language skills yet, back and forth interaction creates new connections in their brain that help them with language learning. Talk, talk, talk. The more words your baby is exposed to, the more their vocabulary grows. When sung to, babies bond to you and your voice. Create fun songs for daily activities. Hearing familiar songs for wake up, snack time, and other activities helps your baby transition throughout their day. Babies don't care if you're a great singer. Sing with all your heart and bond with your baby.
The itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout.
Let's read together. Research shows that reading to your baby every day builds important connections in their brains to help them learn language, math, and social skills. Interact with your child as you read. Point and talk about what you see. Ask questions, make silly comments, and connect the story to your child's life. Read to your baby every day to build language and literacy skills.